America, Reno, Nevada is further west than Los Angeles. Alaska is simultaneously the easternmost, westernmost, and northernmost state. You can drive south from Detroit and end up in Canada. Hawaii has a mountain taller than Everest. Britain still leases a piece of North Carolina. The Mississippi River once ran backwards. Rhode Island is smaller than some individual ranches, and there is a town in the continental United States you can only reach by driving through a foreign country. None of that is wrong. None of it is exaggerated. That is just American geography, quietly being one of the most counterintuitive, extreme, and completely insane pieces of land on the planet, while everyone above it argues about the weather and acts like they know where everything is. 42 facts. Let's go. Fact 1. The Mississippi River once ran backwards. In December 1811 and January 1812, a series of massive earthquakes struck the New Madrid seismic zone in the central United States, among the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in North America. The ground shook so violently that the Mississippi River reversed its flow for several hours. Water ran upstream, new lakes were created, islands appeared and disappeared. The land along the river rose and fell in waves. Eyewitnesses reported the river appearing to boil. Church bells rang in Boston from the vibrations. The earthquakes were felt across the entire eastern half of the continent. The Mississippi ran backwards for hours because the ground underneath it moved so dramatically that the river had no choice. Fact 2. Reno, Nevada is further west than Los Angeles. This one makes people angry because it sounds wrong. Nevada is east of California on every map you have ever looked at, but California bends. Because of the way the state curves, the northwestern corner of Nevada sits further west than the middle section of California. Reno sits at 119.8 degrees west longitude. Los Angeles sits at 118.2 degrees west. Reno, the landlocked Nevada desert city, is geographically west of Los Angeles, the Pacific Coast city. People have argued about this. They are wrong. The coordinates do not care about assumptions. Fact 3. You can drive south from Detroit and end up in Canada. Canada is north of the United States. Everybody knows this. It is one of the most basic geographical facts taught in school. Except in Detroit, because of the unique shape of Michigan's lower peninsula and the way Lake Erie and the Detroit River create the border, Windsor, Ontario, a Canadian city, sits directly south of Detroit, Michigan. The Detroit-Windsor Tunnel goes south under the river and exits in another country. Drive south from parts of Detroit and you are in Canada. The border goes north, south, east, west, and through a river, depending on where you are standing. Michigan's geography does not follow the rules it was supposed to. Fact 4. Alaska is easternmost, westernmost, and northernmost, all three. Everyone gets northernmost and westernmost. Those make sense. Alaska is huge. It sits at the top left of the map, fine. Easternmost is the one that breaks people. The Aleutian Islands extend so far west across the Pacific that they cross the 180-degree meridian line and enter the eastern hemisphere. That makes Alaska, technically, geographically, the easternmost state in the United States as well. One state, three superlatives, all simultaneously true. Alaska is doing things with cardinal directions that should not be possible for a single landmass. The map is not wrong. The assumption that east and west stop mattering at some point is. Fact 5. Hawaii has a mountain taller than Everest. Mount Everest has the highest elevation on Earth. Its peak is 29,032 feet above sea level. No argument there. But Mauna Kea in Hawaii is taller. Measured from its base on the ocean floor to its summit, Mauna Kea is approximately 33,500 feet, around 4,000 feet taller than Everest. The catch is that most of it is underwater, only about 13,800 feet poke above sea level. If you measure mountains from base to peak, rather than sea level to peak, Mauna Kea is the tallest mountain on Earth. It is located in Hawaii. The state most people associate with beaches and pineapple contains the tallest mountain on the planet, most of which is underwater. Fact 6. Britain still leases part of North Carolina. On Ocracoke Island in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, there is a small plot of land that Britain leases from the United States government in perpetuity. In 1942, the British naval vessel HMT Bedfordshire was sunk by a German U-boat off the North Carolina coast. 4 crew members washed ashore and were buried on the island by local residents. The graves and the small monument around them were leased to Britain so they could be considered British soil, the fallen sailors resting on the territory of the country they served. The lease has no end date. Britain technically owns a small piece of a barrier island in North Carolina. It is maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Most Americans have never heard of it. Fact 7. Louisiana loses a football field of land every 100 minutes. Louisiana is disappearing. The Mississippi River Delta, which built Louisiana's coastal land over thousands of years through sediment deposits, is now eroding faster than it can rebuild because levees and river management prevent the sediment from reaching the coast, while sea level rise and oil extraction are accelerating the sinking. Louisiana loses approximately a football field of land every 100 minutes to the Gulf of Mexico. Since 1930, the state has lost over 2,000 square miles of coastal land, an area roughly the size of Delaware. Some communities that existed on land 50 years ago are now underwater. Entire islands, towns, and cemeteries have been swallowed by the Gulf. Louisiana is shrinking in real time, fast enough to be measured in human lifetimes. Fact 8. There is an American town you can only reach by driving through Canada. Point Roberts, Washington is a small community of about 1,300 people on a peninsula that juts south of the Canadian border into the Strait of Georgia. Because the U.S.-Canada border follows the 49th parallel, the tip of the peninsula, Point Roberts, is cut off from the rest of Washington state by British Columbia. To drive from Point Roberts to the rest of the United States, you must cross into Canada, drive through Canadian territory, and re-enter the U.S. at a different border crossing. Point Roberts has a post office, a school, homes, and residents, all of whom must carry a passport to drive to their own country, American soil, accessible only by leaving America first. Fact 9. Four Corners is the only point where 4 U.S. states meet, and it is in the wrong place. Four Corners. The monument marking where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona meet is one of America's most visited geographic novelties. People photograph themselves with one limb in each state. The monument is in the wrong place. A survey error in 1875 placed the marker approximately 1,800 feet from where the true intersection of the states should be. This was discovered, debated, and ultimately settled by the Supreme Court, which ruled that the surveyed line, even if technically incorrect, is the legal boundary. So the only point in the United States where 4 states meet is officially located at a spot everyone agrees is geographically wrong. And the ruling is that it does not matter. Fact 10. The U.S. bought Alaska for 2 cents an acre. In 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, approximately 2 cents per acre. At the time, the deal was mocked as Seward's folly after Secretary of State William Seward, who negotiated it. Critics called it a useless, frozen wasteland. Newspapers called it Walrussia. Alaska contains the largest oil fields in North America. Its fisheries produce roughly half of all seafood caught in the United States. It has extraordinary mineral wealth. Its strategic military position became critical in the 20th century. 2 cents an acre. For the largest state in the Union with more coastline than all other states combined, sitting on top of one of the most resource-rich pieces of land ever purchased by any country. Fact 11. The Colorado River no longer reaches the sea. The Colorado River begins in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado and was supposed to end in the Gulf of California in Mexico. A journey of about 1,450 miles through some of the most dramatic landscapes in North America. It no longer makes it. So much water is extracted from the Colorado along its route. For cities, agriculture, and industry across 7 American states and Mexico, that in most years the river runs completely dry before reaching the sea. The delta that once supported extraordinary wildlife is largely barren. The most over-allocated river in the world powers Las Vegas, irrigates the Imperial Valley, fills Phoenix swimming pools, and runs out of water about 50 miles from the ocean. The sea has not seen the Colorado River consistently since the 1960s. Fact 12. The Mississippi River determines which state you are in, and it keeps moving. The border between several states follows the course of the Mississippi River. That seems straightforward until you account for the fact that the Mississippi moves, rivers meander. They cut new channels, abandon old ones, and shift over time. When the Mississippi moves, the border technically should move with it, but the people, towns, and property on either side do not. This has created situations where towns that were legally in one state ended up on the wrong side of the river after it shifted course, and are now geographically in a different state from their legal jurisdiction. Some stretches of land are physically on one side of the river, but legally part of the state on the other. The Mississippi has been redrawing state borders quietly and without permission for 200 years. Fact 13. Monowai, Nebraska has one resident. She is the mayor, librarian, and bartender. Until the 2020 census, Monowai, Nebraska had exactly one resident, Elsie Eiler, who has lived there since her husband Rudy died in 2004. As the sole resident, Elsie is automatically the mayor. She grants herself a liquor license to run the town tavern. She maintains a library of over 5,000 books in honor of Rudy. She pays taxes to herself. She approves her own decisions. When the 2020 census showed Monowai's population had doubled to 2, Elsie was surprised. She said if someone else was living there, they had been hiding from her, and there was nowhere to hide but her house. The Census Bureau later confirmed it was a data privacy algorithm, not a second resident. Monowai has one person. She runs everything. The town is fine. Fact 14. The lowest and highest points in the contiguous U.S. are 84 miles apart Death Valley, at 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America, and Mount Whitney at 14,505 feet above sea level. The highest point in the contiguous United States are approximately 84 miles apart. You can drive from the lowest point in America to the highest point in the lower 48 states in roughly 2 hours. The elevation change between them, nearly 15,000 feet, represents one of the most dramatic geographic transitions on Earth, compressed into the distance of a short road trip. California contains both simultaneously, visible from each other on a clear day. Fact 15. Yellowstone is a supervolcano that has erupted 3 times. Yellowstone National Park. The geysers, the hot springs, the bison, the tourists, sits on top of one of the largest active volcanic systems on Earth. Supervolcano has erupted 3 times in the last 2.1 million years. Each eruption was catastrophic by any measure. The most recent, 640,000 years ago, deposited ash across most of the western United States. The Calderatha collapsed crater is roughly 35 by 45 miles across. It is still active. The ground in the park rises and falls by inches as the magma chamber below breathes. Hot springs and geysers exist because heat from the chamber reaches the surface. Old Faithful is powered by a supervolcano. The park has approximately 4 million visitors a year. They are picnicking on a volcanic system. Fact 16. The Appalachian Mountains are older than bones. The Appalachian Mountains running down the eastern United States are approximately 480 million years old. To put that in context, fish with backbones did not appear until around 450 million years ago. Most land animals did not exist when these mountains formed. Bones, as a biological technology, had not been invented yet. The Appalachians were once comparable in height to the Alps or the Himalayas. They have been eroding for so long that they are now rounded, low, and blanketed in forest. They are so old that the tectonic plates that created them rearranged themselves into different continents afterwards. The oldest mountains in North America predate virtually all complex land life. They were ancient before dinosaurs existed. Fact 17. Minnesota has more shoreline than California, Florida, and Hawaii. Combined, Minnesota is landlocked, no ocean. Surrounded by other states and Canada, it should have essentially no claim to shoreline prominence. It has approximately 90,000 miles of shoreline, more than California, Florida, and Hawaii combined. The reason is lakes. Minnesota has over 10,000 of them. The state license plate says land of 10,000 lakes, and that number is actually an undercount. Every one of those lakes has a shoreline. The cumulative total of lake shoreline in Minnesota dwarfs the ocean coastline of America's famous beach states. A landlocked state in the upper Midwest has more shoreline than anywhere else in the country. The water is just pointing the wrong direction. Fact 18. The San Andreas Fault is moving Los Angeles towards San Francisco. The San Andreas Fault, the boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate running through California, moves the western side of the fault northwest relative to the eastern side at approximately 2 inches per year. Los Angeles sits on the Pacific Plate. San Francisco sits partly on the North American Plate. They are moving toward each other. In approximately 15 million years, Los Angeles will have moved far enough north to be alongside San Francisco. In 60 million years, what is now Los Angeles will be somewhere near Alaska. California is not just earthquake-prone. It is a landscape in active transit, carrying its cities toward each other at the speed of a growing fingernail. Fact 19. There is a town in the U.S. accessible only by air or foot. No roads. Whittier, Alaska is a small town of around 200 residents on Prince William Sound. It has a grocery store, a harbor, a school, and most of its residents live in a single building, the Begich Towers, a 14-story residential block that also contains the town's post office, a bed and breakfast, a health clinic, and a police station. There are no roads connecting Whittier to the outside world. Access is by boat, small plane, or through a single tunnel shared with a railway, the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, which is one lane and runs on a timed schedule for cars and trains alternately. To drive to Whittier from Anchorage, you wait your turn to enter a mountain tunnel, share it with a railway, and emerge into a town where almost everyone lives in one building. Alaska has entire communities that operate on terms the rest of the country would consider extraordinary. Fact 20. The continental divide splits every raindrop's destiny. Running along the spine of the Rocky Mountains, the continental divide is the line that determines where every drop of water in North America ultimately ends up. Rain falling on the west side flows toward the Pacific Ocean. Rain falling on the east side flows toward the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico. At certain points along the divide, a raindrop landing a few inches to the left will travel to the Pacific. A raindrop landing a few inches to the right will end up in the Gulf of Mexico. Two completely different oceans, separated by less distance than the width of a shoe. Fact 21. New York City is further south than Rome, Italy. New York City sits at approximately 40.7 degrees north latitude. Rome, Italy, sits at 41.9 degrees north. New York, the city people associate with brutal winters, snow, freezing temperatures, and harsh northeastern weather, is geographically further south than Rome. The city people associate with warm summers, Mediterranean climate, and outdoor dining. The reason New York is colder is because of its position on the east coast of a continent, exposed to cold air masses from Canada and the North Atlantic, without the temperature moderating influence of a warm inland sea. Geography and climate are not the same thing. New York proves it every January. Fact 22. Hawaii is moving toward Japan. The Hawaiian Islands are moving northwest toward Japan at approximately 3.5 inches per year. In 10 million years, Hawaii will be roughly 350 miles closer to Japan than it is today. The island chain is being pulled steadily across the Pacific by the same plate movement that created it. The islands formed over a volcanic hotspot and have been moving away from it ever since, which is why the oldest Hawaiian islands are in the northwest and the newest volcanic activity is in the southeast. The Big Island of Hawaii is currently directly above the hotspot. A new island, already named Loihi, is forming on the ocean floor southeast of Hawaii and will breach the surface in roughly 10,000 years. America is actively growing new land in the Pacific. Slowly, but it is happening. Fact 23. California has more people than all of Canada. Canada is the second largest country on Earth by land area. Nearly 10 million square kilometers of mountains, tundra, prairie, and forest stretching from the Pacific to the Atlantic. California is a state, one of 50. California has more people. The population of California sits at around 39 million. All of Canada sits at around 38 million. One American state, occupying a fraction of the land, contains more human beings than an entire country that spans a continent. Canada is not underpopulated by global standards. California is just extraordinarily dense relative to its size and extraordinarily productive relative to both. Fact 24. The Great Lakes contain 21% of the world's surface freshwater. The 5 Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, together hold approximately 21% of the world's surface fresh water. Lake Superior alone is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. If you poured it out across North and South America combined, the entire landmass would be covered under a foot of water. The Great Lakes were carved by glaciers during the last ice age. They are not permanent geological features. They are ice age artifacts. They have existed for only about 10,000 years and will eventually drain or evaporate as the continent's geography continues to change. The largest freshwater system on Earth is a glacial accident that is approximately the same age as human civilization. Fact 25. The U.S. has more tornadoes than the rest of the world. Combined Tornado Alley, the corridor of states running from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska, produces the most violent and frequent tornadoes on Earth. The United States records approximately 1,200 tornadoes per year. The entire rest of the world combined records fewer. The conditions that create this are specific and extraordinary. Cold, dry air from Canada collides with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico across a flat continental interior with no mountain barrier to separate them. The resulting atmospheric instability has no equivalent anywhere else on the planet. America has a geography that manufactures severe weather at industrial scale. The rest of the world gets occasional tornadoes. America gets a dedicated annual season. Fact 26. Alaska has more coastline than all other U.S. states combined. The contiguous 48 states, plus Hawaii, have a combined coastline of approximately 53,000 miles. Alaska alone has 33,904 miles of coastline, more than all of them together if you count every island, inlet, fjord, and bay in its staggering complexity of shoreline. Alaska is not just large. It is so intricately edged with water that its coastline exceeds what the rest of the country produces combined. The state most people picture as inland wilderness has more oceanfront than everywhere else in America put together. Fact 27. The largest living organism on Earth is in Utah. In the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah lives Pando, a grove of quaking aspen trees that is, by mass, the largest known living organism on Earth. Pando is a single organism. All 47,000 trees in the grove are genetically identical, growing from one interconnected root system that has been alive for an estimated 80,000 years. The entire grove, covering 106 acres, shares one root network, pulses with one biological system, and is technically one tree. It weighs approximately 6,000 tons. The largest living thing on Earth is not a blue whale, not a giant sequoia, and not a fungus, though a fungus in Oregon makes a reasonable competing claim. It is a forest in Utah that is secretly one tree, 80,000 years old, dying slowly as its root system is damaged by overgrazing and human activity. Fact 28. Rhode Island is smaller than some individual ranches. Rhode Island is the smallest state in the United States, 1,545 square miles. It is smaller than some individual ranches in Texas. It is smaller than Yellowstone National Park, which covers 3,471 square miles. It is smaller than some single counties in Alaska. Rhode Island also has the longest official name of any state, the State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, though the second part was dropped by referendum in 2020. The smallest state had the longest name for most of its existence and is physically smaller than a national park that also happens to be a super volcano. Fact 29. Death Valley is the hottest, driest, and lowest place in North America. Death Valley holds the record for the highest reliably recorded air temperature on Earth, 134.1 degrees Fahrenheit in July 1913. It is also the lowest point in North America at 282 feet below sea level, and one of the driest places on the continent. Some weather stations record less than 2 inches of rain per year. Lowest, driest, hottest, all in one valley in California. While standing at the lowest point in North America, you can see Telescope Peak, part of the same landscape, which has a summit over 11,000 feet above sea level and receives snow in winter, from below sea level to mountain snow within the same line of sight. Death Valley is not subtle. Fact 30. The Missouri River is longer than the Mississippi. When people name America's longest river, they say the Mississippi. It is the most famous. It is the one that appears in Mark Twain novels and defines the geographic middle of the country. It is not the longest. The Missouri River, which flows into the Mississippi, is approximately 2,341 miles long. The Mississippi itself, from its source to the point where the Missouri joins it, is roughly 1,340 miles. The combined Mississippi-Missouri system is around 3,700 miles, one of the longest river systems in the world. America named its most famous river after the shorter half. The Missouri is longer, starts further away, and ends its independent existence by emptying into the river that gets all the credit. Fact 31. Texas is larger than every country in Western Europe. Texas covers 268,596 square miles. France, the largest country in Western Europe, covers 248,573 square miles. Texas is larger than France. It is also larger than Spain, Germany, and every other Western European nation. You could fit the entire United Kingdom inside Texas almost 3 times. Texas has its own power grid, the only state fully isolated from the rest of the American electrical system. It has the second largest economy of any U.S. state. And it is large enough that driving from one corner to another takes longer than driving across several European countries. Texas is not a state that fits neatly into conventional scales of comparison. Fact 32. The U.S. border with Canada is the longest in the world and almost entirely invisible. The border between the United States and Canada stretches 5,525 miles, the longest international border in the world. Most of it is not marked by anything physical. In many places, it is a line on a map running through forest, farmland, prairie, and lake, with nothing on the ground to indicate you have crossed from one country into another. The only visible marker in many areas is a cleared strip of trees, 20 feet wide, cut through otherwise unbroken wilderness. The world's longest international border is almost entirely invisible, shared by two countries that have not been at war with each other since 1812, and is longer than the distance from New York to London by a significant margin. Fact: 33, Crater Lake, is so deep and clear. Light reaches 400 feet down. Crater Lake in Oregon sits inside the collapsed caldera of Mount Mazama, a volcano that erupted catastrophically approximately 7,700 years ago in one of the largest eruptions in North American history. The lake that formed in the caldera is the deepest in the United States at 1,943 feet because it has no rivers flowing into or out of it, fed only by rain and snow. Its water is extraordinarily pure. Light penetrates to depths of up to 400 feet, giving the lake a blue so intense it reads as unnatural in photographs. It is a lake inside the collapsed remains of a mountain formed by one of the continent's largest volcanic eruptions, fed by no rivers, filled with some of the clearest water in North America, and colored a blue that looks impossible. Fact 34. Florida's highest point is lower than some buildings. Florida is the flattest state in the United States by topography. Its highest natural point, Britton Hill in the Florida Panhandle, stands at 345 feet above sea level. That is the lowest high point of any U.S. state. It is lower than the roof of the Empire State Building. It is lower than some radio towers. It is, by the standards of American geography, barely a hill. Florida is also one of the most hurricane-prone states in the country, with thousands of miles of coastline, a geology of porous limestone riddled with sinkholes, and much of its southern half sitting only a few feet above sea level. The flattest state is also one of the most geologically precarious. Florida is essentially a limestone sponge barely above water, with the sea on three sides and sinkholes below. Fact 35. The U.S. has more public libraries than McDonald's. McDonald's operates approximately 13,400 locations in the United States, one of the most visible and ubiquitous presences in American commercial geography. The United States has approximately 17,000 public libraries. There are more public libraries in America than McDonald's restaurants. The institution most associated with American mass culture and commercial saturation is outnumbered by public libraries in almost every state. This fact is deployed regularly in arguments about American anti-intellectualism and usually surprises everyone on all sides of the argument. Fact 36. Over 40 buildings in New York City have their own zip codes. New York City is so dense, so vertical, so absurdly populated in certain blocks that 41 individual buildings have been assigned their own dedicated zip codes by the U.S. Postal Service. Not streets, buildings. The Empire State Building has its own zip code. So does the Chrysler Building, the World Trade Center complex, and dozens of major Manhattan skyscrapers. The volume of mail flowing into a single address in Midtown Manhattan can exceed the entire postal volume of some small American towns. New York is not just a city with a lot of people. It is a city so concentrated that its buildings have outgrown the addressing system designed for entire neighborhoods. Fact 37. Ohio has a cave that is essentially a giant geode. 40 feet below South Bass Island in Put-in-Bay, Ohio, sits Crystal Cave, a cavity inside the earth lined wall to wall with celestite crystals up to 3 feet wide. It was discovered in 1897 by men digging a well for a winery. They were looking for water. They found a room full of blue crystals. Crystal Cave claims to be the world's largest geode. Guinness World Records eventually stopped listing the category because too many places fought over it. The cave is now a tourist attraction. You enter through a winery, descend 40 feet, and stand inside a crystal-lined hollow in the earth that nobody knew existed until someone dug a well in the wrong place. Fact: 38. Montana claims the world's shortest river, 201 feet long. The Roe River in Montana runs from Giant Springs to the Missouri River. It is 201 feet long. A local fifth-grade class got it listed in the Guinness World Records in the late 1980s as the world's shortest river. Then Oregon objected, claiming the Dee River was only 120 feet. Montana countered that an even shorter waterway existed near the Roe. Guinness eventually stopped listing the category entirely because the argument would not end. The Roe River still exists. It is still 201 feet. Montana still considers the record theirs. The Dee River in Oregon is still shorter. Nobody has officially resolved it. The world's shortest river record is an active dispute between two states, and Guinness has given up. Fact: 39. Montpelier, Vermont, is the only state capital without a McDonald's. Every state capital in the United States has a McDonald's within its city limits, except one. Montpelier, Vermont, population around 8,000, the smallest state capital in the country, has resisted. There is no McDonald's inside the city. Montpelier treats this as a point of civic pride. The city has independent restaurants, a food culture, and an apparent collective agreement that a golden arch is not something they need. Towns with fewer than 200 people have McDonald's. The capital of Vermont does not. Fact 40. The entire state of Rhode Island could fit inside Yellowstone twice. Rhode Island covers 1,545 square miles. Yellowstone National Park covers 3,471 square miles. The smallest state in the United States fits inside a single national park twice, with room to spare. Yellowstone is also bigger than the states of Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It is bigger than some European countries. Yellowstone is one park among 63 designated national parks in the United States. The country has enough protected wilderness that its smallest state would vanish inside a single one of them. Fact 41. There is a point in Glacier National Park where rain flows to 3 different oceans. There is a place in Glacier National Park called Triple Divide Peak where rain can flow to the Pacific, the Atlantic, or Hudson Bay depending on exactly where it lands. A few inches one way sends water west toward the Pacific Ocean. A few inches another way sends it east toward the Atlantic system. A third direction sends it north toward Hudson Bay. One mountain, 3 drainage systems, 3 completely different endings for the same raindrop, decided by where it lands on a piece of rock. Geography usually feels huge: continents, rivers, mountain ranges, oceans. But here, the entire story of a drop of water can change in the distance between one boot print and the next. Fact 42. The finale. Here is the thing about America. Most countries have geography. America has every geography. Tropical ocean islands in the Pacific, Arctic tundra in Alaska, an active supervolcano in Wyoming where 4 million people picnic every summer without thinking twice. A valley in California that is simultaneously the lowest, hottest, and driest place in North America, with snow-capped peaks visible in the same line of sight. The world's largest freshwater system sitting in the middle of a landlocked region, the most tornado-prone corridor on Earth running through the flat center of the continent. A river delta disappearing at a football field every 100 minutes. A coastline so extreme that one state alone has more of it than everywhere else combined. A mountain taller than Everest that nobody talks about because most of it is underwater. And one woman in Nebraska who is the mayor, the librarian, and the bartender, and the town is completely fine. The United States spans 6 time zones, 4 major climate systems, 2 of the world's most active tectonic boundaries, and enough geographic extremes that no other country on Earth comes close to containing this range inside a single political unit. It is not a country with interesting geography. It is a continent wearing a country's name, and most of the people living inside it have never seen most of it. The chapters of this country are still being written. Some of them are literally sinking into the sea. Which of these 42 facts hit you the hardest? Was it the Mississippi running backwards? The mountain taller than Everest sitting underwater in Hawaii? The woman in Nebraska running an entire town by herself? Or the fact that Britain quietly owns a piece of North Carolina right now and nobody talks about it? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If America blew your mind, hit subscribe because we are going through the entire world, one place at a time, and the facts only get wilder from here. We'll see you in the next one.